Obese girl abandoned in forest as sacrifice. Killer, mountain man, became her savior. Take her, the elder intoned, voice sharp as flint. The forest wants fat and plenty. Let it feed. They dragged Evangeline Rosewood through pine needles, silvered by moonlight, her wrists bound in coarse rope, her breath coming in ragged bursts that ghosted the cold. She had been a blacksmith's daughter once, broad-shouldered, soft-cheeked, steady as an anvil. Tonight, she was a dowry the village paid to its fear. At the clearing's heart stood the ancient oak, bark ribbed like ribs of some sleeping beast, roots splayed as if reaching to seize. Women clutched shawls to their mouths. Men stared with the righteous vacancy of people who have given their conscience to tradition. Somewhere, a mother hushed a child who asked why the gift had to cry. "Ava," Aunt Martha called from the crowd, eyes dry, chin set. "Be brave for us." "For you," Ava whispered, but the night stole her breath. They yanked her forward. The elder's hands, thin, papery, convinced, cinched the rope around the oak. "Spirit of Blackstone," he chanted, "we offer what takes much and gives little. We offer waste for bounty." Laughter snickered along the back row. Boys too young to carry rifles, old enough to carry cruelty. Ava flinched as a pine cone struck her shoulder. She lifted her head anyway, refusing to bow to them or the tree or the lie they'd named a god. "I am not waste," she said, voice low, deliberate, a heat that didn't need fire. "I have hammered iron, hauled ore, fed your sick when you were afraid to touch them. If your spirit wants a life, let it come claim mine itself." The elder's prayer staggered, then recovered. He smeared ash across her brow, a crude crown of surrender, and the villagers filed out in a hush that was not reverence, but relief. One by one, lanterns winked into darkness until only the moon remained, a pale lid closing over the world. Silence pressed in. The forest breathed its damp, mushroomed breath. Somewhere, a fox said something small and final. Cold gnawed at her bare forearms, crawled under the thin dress until even her bones felt made of glass. Hours stretched the way hunger does, elastic, cruel. Then the night changed. It wasn't a twig snap or a wolf's pad. It was weight moving the way weather moves, inevitable. A shadow unstitched itself from the tree line, taller than the stories, broader than the lies. An axe haft gleamed, then vanished. The figure stopped in the moonstrip, and eyes the color of green ice found hers. "You're not for the forest," the man said, voice like a door long shut opening at last. "You're for living." Steel flashed. Rope sighed. Blood surged back into her hand so painfully she almost screamed. The stranger caught her before her knees met the roots, heat and cedar and something wounded clinging to him like a second coat. "They call me a killer," he said, cutting the final knot. "Tonight I'd rather be a thief and steal you from a death you don't owe." The man's name was Matthias Blackthorn, though no villager dared to speak it above a whisper. They called him the Forest Killer, the Cursed One, or simply the Ghost in the Pines. He was a man the children were warned about, the one who'd eat your soul if you wandered too deep. Yet, as he carried Ava through the dripping ferns and whispering trees, there was nothing monstrous about him. His arms were steady. His breath came slow. When she shivered, he shifted her closer to his chest without a word. "Why?" she managed to ask. Her throat burned from hours of crying. "Why would you save me? Don't you know what they'll say? That I'm cursed now, like you." His answer was quiet. "They've called me cursed for 19 years, Ava Rosewood. I stopped caring what they say a long time ago." She didn't know how he knew her name. Perhaps he had heard it from the mob. Or perhaps, like the forest itself, he simply knew. He walked with a hunter's ease, boots sinking into the soft moss. Behind them, the sounds of the village faded, the echo of bells, the mutter of superstition, the sigh of people washing their hands of guilt. Ahead, only the hum of crickets and the wet heartbeat of rain. When they reached his cabin, the moon was fading. The structure stood hidden in a hollow between two ridges, not a ruin, but a refuge. Smoke curled from a stone chimney. A deer hide hung drying on the wall. Wooden charms and herbs swayed from the rafters. Everything smelled of cedar, smoke, and something faintly sweet. Honeysuckle, maybe. Matthias pushed the door open with his shoulder and carried her inside. The warmth hit her like a shock. He laid her gently on a bearskin rug near the fire, then knelt beside her. "You're cold to the bone," he murmured. "Don't move." He poured water into a tin cup and held it to her lips. It was clean, crisp, the first kindness she'd tasted in years. She drank until she coughed, and he steadied her head. "Easy," he said. "You're safe here." Ava's eyes flicked to the door. "Safe? They'll come for me. They'll think you stole their sacrifice." Matthias's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Let them think it. The forest has taken worse from them than their lies." She tried to sit up, but the pain in her wrists stopped her. He saw the red welts where the ropes had cut her. Without speaking, he fetched a basin and a strip of linen, dipped it into warm water, and began cleaning the wounds. His hands were calloused, but his touch was impossibly gentle. "You should have let me die," she whispered. "Now they'll hate you more." "They already hate me as much as they can," he said. "That gives me freedom to do what's right." The words lodged in her chest. No one had ever spoken for her before. When he finished, he wrapped her wrists in clean cloth, then turned away to tend the fire. The flames leapt higher, revealing the lines of his back through the worn leather coat, a man built from labor and loneliness. "Who are you, really?" she asked. "Just a man who made mistakes," he said without turning, "and lost everything because of them." She studied his profile, the beard streaked with silver, the scar that traced from temple to jaw, the eyes that seemed to look both at her and through her. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "What they say, that you killed your wife?" The fire popped. For a long time he said nothing. Then, with the weight of someone opening an old wound, he answered, "I tried to save her. They called it murder because it was easier than admitting they let her die." Silence thickened between them, not fearful, but reverent. The kind of silence that lives between two souls who have both been broken by the same cruelty. When Ava spoke again, her voice trembled. "They'll never stop calling you names." Matthias finally turned, his gaze steady on hers. "They can call me whatever they want, Ava. The only thing that matters is what you believe." She looked into those weary green eyes, eyes that had seen death, exile, and still chose to save a stranger. And in that moment, she believed, not in spirits, not in the forest's curse, but in him. Outside, dawn was rising, gray, cold, and clean. The first light crept through the window, falling across her face as if the forest itself approved. For the first time since the ropes were tied, she exhaled. And for the first time in 19 years, Matthias Blackthorne prayed, not to the gods who had betrayed him, but to the fragile beating hope that maybe, just maybe, He had saved more than a life that night. He had saved his own soul. For the next few days, the forest became both a cage and a cradle. Ava's body healed slowly, wrists wrapped in linen, skin bruised and fevered, but her spirit was raw, like metal that had been hammered too thin. Matthias tended to her as he might to a wounded animal, quiet, deliberate, never too close unless she asked for warmth. Each morning he left before sunrise, his rifle slung across his back, to hunt or gather. She would wake to the sound of firewood cracking and the faint scent of venison stew simmering on the hearth. By the time he returned, she had tidied the cabin, swept the floor, washed the dishes, folded the blankets. It wasn't out of duty. It was her way of earning her place in the silence he offered. The forest outside was vast, a cathedral of green shadows and gold light filtering through the canopy. From the window, Ava often watched him move among the trees, tall, steady, silhouette against the mist. He walked like a man who belonged to the earth, not to people. One morning, after her strength had returned enough to stand, she asked, "Can I walk with you today?" Matthias paused at the door. "You sure?" She nodded. "I've been still too long. I want to see the forest that was supposed to eat me." He studied her for a moment, then handed her his old wool coat. "Stay close. It's easy to lose yourself out there." They walked for hours. The forest was alive, whispering pine needles, murmuring brooks, and the far-off cry of hawks. The air was sharp and pure, scented with sap and soil. For the first time in years, Ava felt the cold not as an enemy, but as proof she was still alive. When the ground grew steep, Matthias offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His palm was rough, scarred but warm, a warmth that felt like safety rather than pity. "You know," she said between breaths, "if my village saw you like this, they'd think I'd gone mad." "They've already decided you're mad," he replied. "Might as well enjoy it." She laughed, the sound surprising even herself. It echoed between the trees, a fragile, human sound that chased away the ghosts of sacrifice. They reached a clearing where a stream cut through moss-covered stones. Matthias crouched, filling his canteen, and Ava knelt beside him. "This place," she whispered, "it doesn't feel cursed at all." "That's because it isn't," he said. "The forest only takes what men give it, blood, fear, lies. The rest it keeps safe." Ava looked at him. "You speak as if it listens." "It does," he said simply. "You just have to be quiet enough to hear it." For a moment, she thought he was talking about more than trees. By the time they returned to the cabin, dusk had wrapped the woods in violet. The air was colder, but Ava's cheeks glowed with color, her hair tangled with pine needles. Matthias built a fire while she prepared tea from the herbs he'd gathered, mint, wild rose, and something he called moonleaf. They sat at the table, two misfits sharing warmth, while the wind clawed at the windows. "Tell me," she said softly, "why did you stay here after what happened?" Matthias stirred the fire with the poker. "Because running wouldn't change what I'd done, and because she's still here." "She?" "My wife, Rosalind." He looked into the flames as if they held her reflection. "I buried her up on the ridge. Every time I light this fire, I feel like she's near." Ava's throat tightened. "You loved her?" "I did," he said. "Still do. But love changes shape. It doesn't die. It just finds new rooms to live in." They sat in silence for a while, the fire painting their faces in shades of gold and ember. Ava felt something shift inside her, a quiet recognition of a man not made of violence, but of grief turned into gentleness. When he finally looked at her, his voice was barely a whisper. "You remind me of her, not because you look alike, though you do, but because you don't flinch from pain. You face it." Ava swallowed hard. "If you knew what I felt inside, you wouldn't say that." "I know enough," he said. "You were left to die, and you're still standing. That's strength, Ava. Not even the forest can take that away." His words wrapped around her like a blanket she hadn't realized she needed. That night, snow began to fall, the first of the season. Ava stood at the door, watching the flakes drift through the lamplight. Behind her, Matthias moved quietly, adding logs to the fire. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's dangerous," he replied. "Maybe both," she countered. He glanced at her, and for the first time, his guarded expression softened. "Maybe both," he agreed. She turned toward him, the glow of the fire dancing on her skin, and for a heartbeat, the world felt impossibly still. Two people the world had abandoned now stood together in a house the world had forgotten. And as the snow whispered against the roof, Ava knew she had crossed a threshold she couldn't return from. She wasn't afraid anymore, not of the forest, not of him, not even of herself. In that wilderness of silence and snow, the first seed of love took root, quiet, steady, unbreakable. Winter settled over Blackstone like a heavy quilt, soft but unrelenting. By December, snow buried the trails, the streams froze into silver veins, and the forest grew so quiet Ava could hear her own heartbeat in the hush. But inside Matthias's cabin, warmth pulsed, slow, steady, human. The first weeks were survival. Matthias hunted, while Ava learned to tend the fire and dry meat for storage. She mended his torn shirts, made stew from wild herbs and venison, and hung pine cones along the rafters, so their scent would mask the smoke. Slowly, the place stopped feeling like a stranger's house and began to breathe like a home. Every day followed its own rhythm. Sunrise light spilling through frost-rimmed glass, the creak of the rocking chair by the hearth, the hiss of logs collapsing into ember. When Matthias came back from the woods, snow dusting his hair and beard, he would always pause at the doorway, stamping his boots. "Cold out there?" she'd ask. "Only until I stepped inside," he'd answer, his gaze lingering a heartbeat longer than before. One morning, Ava found him working outside, splitting wood with his axe. The blade rose and fell in slow, sure arcs, each swing a poem of muscle and memory. She stood watching until he noticed. "You shouldn't be out without a coat," he said, breath misting. "I wanted to help," she replied. "You can't do everything alone." He wiped his brow, the ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. "You're persistent." "Stubborn," she corrected. "My father used to say I was forged, not born." He chuckled, the sound rare and deep. "Then maybe you belong here more than you think." She picked up a smaller axe. "Show me how." He hesitated, then stepped behind her, large hands closing around hers, guiding her grip. "Don't force it," he murmured near her ear. "Let the weight do the work." The world narrowed to the rhythm of breath and heartbeat. His warmth pressed against her back, his voice a low rumble in her chest. When the log split clean in two, she laughed out loud, a pure, bright sound that startled even her. Matthias smiled, something fierce and tender stirring in his eyes. You learn fast. Good teacher, she said, cheeks flushed, from cold or from him, she wasn't sure. That evening, as the wind howled through the pines, they shared stew by firelight. Ava stirred her bowl thoughtfully. Do you ever miss people? Matthias was silent for a long time before answering. I miss what people could have been. He met her gaze. But I don't miss who they were. She nodded. I understand. He studied her face, the way her eyes caught the light, the curve of her cheek as she smiled faintly. Do you? I do, she said softly, because I was them once. I believed what they believed. I thought you were a monster. And now? Now I think you're the only person I've ever met who tells the truth, even when it hurts. Something shifted in the air between them, fragile and electric. He looked away first, the way a man looks when afraid to hope. Days bled into weeks. Snow kept them prisoner, but neither minded. There was always work, repairing the roof, fetching water through a hole in the ice, caring for the small garden Matthias had hidden under a frame of glass. One afternoon, she found him carving a piece of wood by the window. His fingers moved with surprising delicacy for such a large man. What are you making? She asked. He held it up. A small bird, wings unfurled, caught in flight. For the mantle, he said. Something to remind us spring still comes. It's beautiful, she whispered. So are you, he said without thinking. The words hung between them like a flame. She froze, the color rising in her cheeks. He started to apologize, but she shook her head. Don't, she said quietly. No one's ever called me that and meant it. I meant it, he said. She smiled. Small, trembling, real. At night, the wind roared outside, rattling shutters like the growl of an old god. But inside, peace reigned. Ava would sit by the hearth, darning socks or reading from one of Matthias's few books, old frontier journals, worn Bible pages, poems scrawled in faded ink. Sometimes he'd sit beside her, silent, listening to her voice as she read aloud. Once she caught him watching her lips move, his hand tightening unconsciously around his mug. Something wrong? She asked, flustered. He cleared his throat. No, just haven't heard another voice in this cabin for a long time. Then I'll keep reading, she said, and smiled. One evening, she burned her hand pulling a pot from the fire. She gasped. He was at her side, instantly gripping her wrist. Let me see. It's nothing. It's not nothing. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the reddened skin. He guided her to sit, then poured cool water over the burn, his fingers steady even as hers trembled. Why are you always so careful with me? She whispered. Because once, he said, voice low, I wasn't careful enough, and it cost me everything. Her throat tightened. She reached up and touched his cheek. A simple gesture, but it felt like breaking a rule neither had dared to name. Matthias. He caught her hand, held it there against his face. His eyes closed for a moment, as if the warmth of her palm was something holy. I'm here, he said softly. That's enough for now. Weeks passed. The forest changed its colors, white to gray, gray to green. Life crept back into the valley. Snow melted into rivers that sang against stone. One morning, Ava woke before dawn and stepped outside. Mist wove through the trees like breath. She turned to see Matthias standing on the porch watching her. What are you doing up so early? He asked. Listening, she said. To what? The forest, she smiled. You were right. It does speak. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it." He chuckled softly. "What's it saying today?" "That I don't want to leave," she answered. Matthias's expression flickered. Surprise, longing, fear. "You'd stay? After everything?" She turned toward him, eyes shining in the soft light. "If you'll have me." The silence that followed was not uncertainty, but recognition, the kind that happens when two lonely souls realize the world has already chosen for them. And as the sun broke through the pines, Matthias reached for her hand. "Then stay," he said simply. "Stay, Ava." And she did. Spring thawed the mountain, but with it came whispers from below. When the traders from Raven Hollow passed through, their wagons heavy with salt and rumor, Matthias noticed how they stared too long at the smoke rising from his chimney. By the third visit, one finally spoke. "They say you took the sacrifice," the man muttered, eyes darting, "that the forest's curse'll fall on us all because of you." Matthias said nothing. He simply handed over the coins for flour and watched the man ride away. But that night, when Ava noticed how silent he'd become, she understood. "They've found out," she said. He nodded. "Rumor travels faster than truth." "What will they do?" He stirred the fire. "They'll talk first. Then they'll come." Ava couldn't sleep. The forest, once her sanctuary, felt different now. 1,000 unseen eyes watching through the trees. She went outside, drawn to the slope behind the cabin where Matthias often disappeared at dusk. A faint path wound upward through the pines, leading to the ridge. Halfway up, she found it, a clearing ringed with wildflowers, the soil dark and soft. In its center, 2 wooden crosses stood side by side, weathered but carefully kept. At their base lay a small carving, a bird, wings outstretched, just like the one on their mantel. And in front of the graves, a third marker, freshly carved, unmarked, waiting. Her breath caught. She turned at the sound of footsteps. Matthias stood behind her, face unreadable. "I told you not to come up here," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to intrude," she whispered. "I just—" He stepped forward, his shadow falling over the crosses. "That one," he said, nodding to the fresh steak, "was meant for me. I carved it the night I almost ended things." Ava's throat tightened. "Matthias." He looked at her, eyes raw. "When I lost them, I thought I was cursed. The villagers made sure I believed it. And when I found you tied to that tree, I thought it was the forest mocking me, giving me another soul to lose." Her voice trembled. "But you didn't lose me." He closed his eyes. "Not yet." The next days were thick with tension. Every creak of the wood sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind felt like warning. Ava tried to reassure him, to speak of hope and renewal, but he had grown distant, quieter, sharper. One evening, she followed him into the woods as dusk fell. He stopped near the stream and crouched, brushing snowmelt from a hollow in the rock. Beneath it lay a rusted metal box. "Matthias," she said, "what is that?" He didn't answer. He opened it, revealing a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were letters, dozens of them, and beneath them a pistol, old but polished clean. "They're from the village," he said. "Years of begging, for medicine, for shelter, for mercy. Every time I tried to help them, they found new ways to hate me." He looked up, his expression grim. "They'll come with guns next time, Ava. They've always wanted an excuse." "Then we'll leave," she said quickly. We can go over the ridge, find another town. They'll just call me a monster somewhere else," he interrupted. "And if they find you with me, they'll say you've been bewitched." Ava stepped closer. "Let them talk. I don't care what they say." "You will," he said softly, "because they won't stop until they destroy everything I touch." Her anger flared. "You think you're cursed because it's easier than believing you can still be saved." He froze, her words hitting like a blow. "You're not a ghost, Matthias," she said. "You're a man, and men can still fight for what's right." His jaw tightened, the old soldier's resolve flickering in his eyes. Then he nodded. "If they come, I'll protect you, no matter the cost." The following night, the cost arrived. They heard them before they saw them. Voices echoing through the valley, torches flickering against the dark. Ava rushed to the window. "It's them," she whispered. "The villagers." Matthias grabbed his rifle. "Stay behind me." The mob poured into the clearing, led by the same elder who'd once tied her to the oak. His face twisted with fanatic fury. "Return the offering, Blackthorn," he shouted. "You've cursed us all." Matthias stepped onto the porch, calm but unyielding. "You've cursed yourselves, old man. You traded mercy for fear." "Where is she?" the elder snarled. "The chosen one." Ava stepped out beside Matthias before he could stop her. "I'm right here." The crowd murmured. Shock, superstition, fear. She raised her chin. "Look at me. Do I look cursed to you, or do I look alive?" "Blasphemy!" the elder barked. "The forest spared you because it wants your soul later." "No," she said, voice rising over the noise. "It spared me because he," she pointed to Matthias, "had the courage you never did. He saved me while you abandoned me." The elder's face darkened. "He killed your kind before, his own wife." "That's a lie," Ava shouted. "She died because of you, because none of you would help." For a moment, silence held. Then one of the younger men lowered his torch. "Is that true?" he asked the elder. The old man's eyes flicked, uncertain. "We obeyed the old ways. That's how we've survived." "Survived?" Matthias said, his voice low and steady. "You call this survival? Feeding your own to fear?" He cocked the rifle, but didn't aim. "No more?" Something broke in the crowd, the brittle shell of belief cracking under the weight of shame. The younger men pulled the elder back. "Go," Matthias said, "before the forest decides it's tired of you." One by one, they left, torches flickering away into the night. When silence returned, Ava exhaled a sob of relief. Matthias set the rifle down, his hands trembling now that the danger had passed. "You shouldn't have come outside," he murmured. "And let them call you monster alone?" she said. "Never again?" He looked at her then, really looked, the woman he had saved, who had now saved him in return. "I thought saving you would damn me," he whispered. "Instead, you redeemed me." She touched his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm. "You were never damned, Matthias. You were just waiting to be found." Outside the wind shifted, no longer howling, but sighing through the trees like a prayer answered. The curse had never belonged to the forest. It had always belonged to the hearts of men. And in that quiet clearing beneath the stars, Matthias Blackthorn finally believed that maybe, just maybe, the forest could forgive him after all. Days passed after the mob's retreat, and the forest slowly remembered peace. But peace, Ava soon learned, was only an interlude before fate circled back to test what it had built. The snow had melted into rivers that shimmered like veins of light. Spring flowers pushed through the earth around the cabin, and for the first time in years, Matthias allowed himself to believe in tomorrow. He and Ava repaired the fence, rebuilt the henhouse, planted new seeds. Laughter returned to his voice, hesitant but real. Yet even as joy bloomed, the forest carried a whisper that refused to fade. A storm was coming. It struck on a night without stars. Thunder rolled across the valley as wind howled through the trees. Matthias was chopping wood under the eaves when he heard the sound, the faint crack of a rifle echoing off stone. "Inside," he said sharply. Ava froze, her hands tightening on the candle. "What is it?" "Trouble," he said. "Lock the door." But before she could move, a voice called from beyond the tree line, "Blackthorn!" It was the elder, the same man who had once tied Ava to the oak. His white hair clung to his face in the rain, his eyes gleaming with madness. Behind him, 3 younger men held torches and shotguns. "You think you can defy the spirits and live?" he roared. "The forest demands blood." Matthias stepped forward into the downpour, rifle in hand. "The forest demands nothing," he growled. "Only men like you do." The elder sneered. "Then it will take yours instead." He raised his hand, and gunfire split the night. Matthias dove aside, the bullet grazing his shoulder. He returned fire, shattering a torch. Sparks exploded into the wet air, illuminating the chaos. The men shouting, the rain hissing on flame, the trees swaying like silent witnesses. Ava screamed from the doorway, "Stop it, please!" One of the attackers turned toward her, musket leveled. Before he could shoot, Matthias surged forward with a roar. The two collided, crashing into the mud. The rifle went off harmlessly into the ground. Matthias struck once, twice, until the man went still. The others fled into the dark, leaving only the elder standing at the edge of the clearing, clutching his staff like a cross. "You can't kill the curse," he hissed. "It'll take her too, just like the first one." Something inside Matthias broke. "No," he said, voice shaking. "Not again." The elder lunged, knife flashing. Ava cried out as Matthias turned, catching the blade with his forearm. The steel sank deep, but he didn't flinch. He twisted, wrenched the knife away, and threw the old man to the ground. The elder gasped, rain soaking his wrinkled face. "You'll damn us all." "No," Matthias said, his voice low. "You damned yourselves long ago." He turned away, but the elder wasn't finished. With a snarl, he lunged once more, clutching a broken torch, flames sputtering in the wind. "Matthias!" Ava shouted. He spun just as the torch came down and drove it back, the flame striking the old man's cloak. Fire leapt up in an instant. The elder screamed, stumbling backward into the mud. Within seconds, the rain smothered both fire and voice. Silence returned. Matthias stood motionless, chest heaving. Blood and rain dripped from his arm. Ava ran to him, hands trembling. "You're hurt," she whispered. "It's nothing," he rasped. "It's not nothing." She tore a strip from her dress and wrapped it around his wound. "You can't leave me, Matthias, not after everything." He looked at her, her face pale and wet with rain, her eyes fierce and shining, and something in him yielded. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly. The storm broke overhead, wind lashing through the pines, but inside the circle of their embrace it felt still. Ava pressed her forehead to his chest. "You saved me again." He smiled faintly. "No, you saved me first." And there, beneath the thunder and the tears, he kissed her. a kiss that carried every loss, every redemption, every unspoken promise that neither would ever face the darkness alone again. By morning, the rain had stopped. The forest shimmered with dew, washed clean of fear and fire. They buried the elder quietly, without hatred, and left a sprig of pine upon his grave, a gesture not of forgiveness, but of release. As the sun broke through the clouds, Matthias looked at Eva and whispered, "It's over." She took his hand. "No," she said softly, "it's just beginning." And somewhere, high in the canopy, a bird sang, the same song that once echoed over two forgotten graves, now rising for two souls who had finally found peace. Summer came quietly that year. The mountain, once haunted by whispers of curses and ghosts, now hummed with the sound of bees and flowing water. The forest no longer felt like a graveyard. It felt like a heartbeat. Matthias's wound healed slowly. Eva took care of him every day, cleaning and wrapping it with gentle, steady hands. He protested, of course, until she silenced him with a look. "You've spent half your life saving others," she said softly. "Let me save you for once." They rebuilt the cabin together. The porch was repaired, the roof sealed, and new flowers bloomed along the path leading down to the stream. On the mantel above the hearth sat 3 carvings, 2 birds in flight, and a third, smaller one, newly added, its wings open as if ready to follow. When evening fell, they sat together by the fire. No words, no fear, only the quiet rhythm of shared breath. The world beyond the trees might still call him a killer, but here, within these walls, he was simply hers. Eva rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about what they'll say now?" Matthias smiled faintly. "They'll say the forest took us both. Maybe that's for the best." She tilted her face toward him. "No, let them say the truth, that the forest gave us back what the world stole." He looked down at her, his rough hand finding hers. "And what did it give us?" Her answer was simple. "Home." Sometimes she'd wander to the clearing where the 3 graves stood, Rosalind, the child, and the elder who once tried to destroy them. She planted wild flowers there, not out of duty, but as a promise that no one else would ever be buried for a lie. Matthias never joined her there, but when she returned, he would always be waiting by the cabin, a cup of tea steaming in his hand. He didn't need to ask where she'd been. He already knew. On one of those evenings, as twilight pooled in the valley, Eva looked back toward the cabin. Smoke rose from the chimney, curling upward like a prayer. And standing in the doorway, Matthias lifted his hand in silent greeting. For the first time in her life, she felt unafraid of the night. Inside, the firelight painted their faces gold. Matthias reached out, brushed a strand of red hair from her cheek, and said quietly, "You're safe here." Eva smiled, eyes glistening. "It's your home," she whispered, "if you'll have me." He took her hand, pressed it to his heart. "It's ours now," he said. Outside, the forest rustled, not with menace, but with life. Wind in the pines, the low murmur of water. 2 souls who had defied a world of superstition, breathing in the same peace that others had once feared. The forest had not wanted sacrifice. It had only ever wanted witnesses, and now it had them. Every story leaves a trace, not on paper, but in the quiet spaces it opens inside us. Matthias and Eva remind us that love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives as a whisper in the dark, choosing mercy over fear. Maybe you felt like them once, misunderstood, cast out, or told you weren't worth saving. If so, remember this: the world's judgment is loud, but love is louder. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And if you still believe that kindness can break curses, stay close. The next story is already waiting for you in the dark.